I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who it's the 21st. It's the first day of spring. What are you doing?
Oh, listen, Jim, I think we're already in baseball season. I go from one kid's sport to the next. I saw a meme the other day that was saying one kid is like one kid, 2 kids is like 5 kids, and then 3 kids is like 3,400 kids, a tornado, and a donkey. And that's how I feel. That literally is how I feel. Having 3 kids in different sports, like, oh, my goodness. So we are now in baseball season. So that's where my springs go in spring training. But I'm excited that it is not necessarily the 14 years of winter that it seemed like this year. And it's finally. So how are you? What are you planning for this spring, Jim? How are you feeling with a little bit more daylight?
Well, I love your stories about being a dad with that many kids. I mean, my ex and I, Michelle, we only had the one. We had the lovely Alice, who, by the way, turned 31 earlier this week. And what's the old cliche? God only gives you as much as you can handle. And I have to say, I don't think God looked at myself and my ex Michelle and said, no. Alice sort of redefined ease of use. She was a great toddler and a great teen, and maybe when she gets into her 40s, she'll become challenging. But no, great kid, and certainly. I love that description. 3,000 children, a tornado, and a donkey. Yes, I have seen minivans just like that.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's hit by every day. Yes, You're right. Yeah, no, but that's listen. I'm happy that we're moving into the March. So happy. What do they say? Spring equinox? Is that what you said it was?
That it is. March 21st is the spring equinox. So hopefully everyone by this point has recovered from daylight savings time. I need several days to recover from leaping forward. In fact, in my case, it's spring forward and fall down and take a nap for several days. So.
Right.
Well, anyway, folks, you're not here to listen to old farts complain about the spring equinox or daily 70. You're here for Universal news. And so let's get to that. But before we do, we, of course, have to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is the terrific folks over at Be Our Guest Vacation. And, again, it's spring. Are you planning your next adventure? If so, let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacation take care of the details. As a platinum-level earmarked travel agency, they provide top-tier concierge services for trips to Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood, the Disney parks, cruises, and so much more. Get started today at beourguestvacations.com and be sure to mention that the Epic Universal podcast sent you. All right, so we now jump into the news portion of the show, Eric. And so what did we learn this week when we're researching what's going on with the Universal Parks and Resorts?
Heavy-hitting news here. We have the names of the parking lot sections at Epic Universe. And that's where we're at in this process, is we will talk about anything and everything Epic Universe because we're excited about it. So we're so excited about just the parking lot names. But Jim, have you seen these?
Well, it's interesting you say this because these are actually a lot more important than you might think they are. I mean, face it, the typical person on vacation in their rental car, which they only know, they pick it up at the airport, they drive it to the hotel, they get up in the morning and what was I driving?
Right.
Do I remember what I drove? And then you get in the car, you drive into that giant, remember, if we're talking Universal Orlando, those 2 giant parking structures by the park, And what they found was it wasn't just enough to say, okay, you're in the Kong, you're on the Kong level, or you're the Jaws level, or the Back to the Future level. People would still forget. And they had giant graphic packages, and they finally found the thing that kind of put them over the top, that reminded people, is they would play the music.
Oh, Jim, this was not staged or anything. That is what I really wanted to bring up, is that
Mhm,
remembering, like,
mhm.
I thought that was an amazing addition, and that is what I remember. I parked in Jurassic Park, and I
There we go.
remember the music and so forth. And I was like, that was one of those. Now we stayed on property
Mhm,
and had the bus take us for a lot, but one day we did drive over. I think that's when this last December trip, and we had to park.
mhm,
And I thought it was amazing. I was like, I love this added enhancement. It's just a little thing of the music play. And I'm like, oh, I want to park in Jaws next time because I want
mhm.
to hear it and so forth. So
There
I'm
we
so
go.
glad you mentioned that.
But here's the thing, all right, that those are parking structures where
Right.
each floor you can do that. You can have audio playing. Whereas, let's be honest, Epic Universe is a classic big flat sea of asphalt. And by the way, as Eric mentioned, we have our 5 parking lot sections. We have Explorer, Monster, Viking, Gamer, and Hero. And I'm just going to say this out loud here. All right. If I'm staying in Monster and Viking, I'll remember that. But Explorer, Gamer, or Hero?
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
almost where I'm kind of saying, like, I don't think I'm going to remember. They're almost like, was it Explorer Hero? So
Yeah.
they're going to have to make really good graphics or something to really, I mean, we get it. They're for
Yeah.
all the lands. We get what
Yeah.
it's for, but I'm kind of with you there. I was kind of underwhelmed. Um, but we have the information now. We know what they're
Yeah.
called.
And
You know.
also, it is also worth noting that if you're a good theme park veteran, I mean, face it, you get out of the car, you walk to the end of the aisle, you pull out your phone, you take a
Right.
photo of the number and the row, and at least at least you got that info. I mean, it's still 10 o'clock at night. You're out there in the dark trying to find the rental car that you barely remember.
Right. Well, that's when you have all the sirens. That's when you have the symphony of people hitting their hat, like their emergency, and so that everybody's hearing, to find their car alarm. So
Mhm.
that is what happens typically at the end of night for at least many of
This
us.
is
But
this is true. This
so
is
it's
it.
always
Now,
very humorous.
yep. Okay. Now speaking of parking related Universal stuff. Now, mind you, we have to change to Universal Studios Hollywood, but you came across something interesting going on out there as well.
Yeah, it looks like that they expanded its free parking benefit for gold and platinum pass members, so it includes the complimentary parking after 6 now. The free general parking is available, except for Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays in April and May, September, October, due to the Fan Fest and Halloween Horror Nights. But basically, you used to have to pay a discounted price after 6, but now it's essentially free. So. I thought that was, I mean, anytime you could do free parking, but this is the funny thing that I wanted to bring up to you. It was provided as a benefit, and we like that. But the hours for most of these parks, Universal doesn't stay open as late for a lot of these. So it was a lot of people were like, hey, this is great and all, but maybe you should stay open later than just an extra hour if you're closing at 7. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to show up and park from 6 to 7 free. So that was the complaints that I saw people talking. But like, I don't know. Do the parks stay open later in Hollywood than they do in Florida? Do you know this?
Well, the other thing it's important to remember here is that this is more about getting people to go to City Walk, to go to
Okay.
the restaurants and the movie theater there. And in fact, our good friend and collaborator Jim Schull, who's been keeping tabs on what they're doing with,
Hmm.
they're changing where the security position for Universal Hollywood is located. Now that they're actually moving it deeper back into where after you parked your car at City Walk and you hike to a point that where you walk into City Walk and then you continue on to eventually being able to enter Universal Studios Hollywood. And as Mr. Schul has explained, this is largely because there's another hotel that's about to be built at Universal Hollywood. In fact, as I understand it, on top of what is now the VIP parking there, that will be right up by the entrance. So, and the notion is kind of like you have at DCA, how at the what is it, the Grand Californian,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
which has its own, sort of back door into the park and in its own security position. That supposedly that will be one of the perks of this hotel. That you want to stay in this hotel at Universal, hey, you can walk straight into the park. So,
Oh, well, that's interesting. And I mean, I know over the weeks we've seen a lot of stores and
mhm,
places like close without
mhm.
any type of replacement announced. So I mean, that makes sense where they could be maybe shifting things around and making sure they have the real estate available to move stuff around. So either way, I thought it was worth mentioning and at least looking at for our friends over on the West Coast or anybody that's traveling there for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, that in fact, Nancy and I are have been eyeballing plane tickets for my trip out west in May, so Alice and I can then to go do the first round of FanFest. Though our good friend Alicia Steller seems to have discovered this, there may be another event coming.
Well, that's I just saw this on X not so long ago. She actually just kind of dropped this that Universal has filed a trademark application for Universal Mega Movie Summer, the
Hmm.
logo, all right, for the use of the theme park. So, as you might remember, last year there was the Universal Mega Movie Parade, which
Hmm.
had a lot of vintage. I mean, it had more Ghostbusters and more Jaws and ET, kind of like the classic '90s
Hmm.
Universal stuff. But now we have a logo which doesn't say much. I mean, it's suggesting that there's a new event or seasonal offer for the theme parks, whether it be for Hollywood or Orlando, we don't know, and it's still not yet approved, but it's there, and that's kind of she's kind of really known for that, isn't she? For a lot of these patents, finding this stuff and keeping an alert on it.
That's why we all pay attention to Alicia.
Yeah. So, what's your thoughts, Jim? Do you think this is a just another parade? Do you think this is maybe part of that survey that you and Len talked about a couple weeks ago? Could this be?
That's interesting because the survey you're talking about appeared to be Universal Orlando effectively kicking the tires for a fan fest event on the East Coast. Realistically, though, I don't see them getting that up and running in time for this year. So I'm kind of intrigued by a Universal Mega Movie Summer
It could just be
promotion.
I mean, they can use the floats again, right? I mean, it just could be a matter of they use kind of what they did last year,
Yeah,
right?
but also remember we do have our Scarlett Johansson Jurassic World movie
Oh
coming
yeah.
out this summer. And also, remember the Universal promotion machine for Wicked Part Two for Good
Mm.
will be in fact by the way I have heard just to make sure that the opening weekend of is it Jurassic World Rebirth or Jurassic World Reborn? I forget which one that it's called, but evidently to juice the box office for that. My understanding is our very first trailer for Wicked,
Oh.
for Good will
Oh,
be it.
geez.
So that's the thing. Never mind all the adult males that will go out because it's a Jurassic World movie. People get eaten by dinosaurs, and it's now all of the teenage girls will have to
Right.
go out for the opening weekend as well.
So it looks like Lainey's going to come along. So
There we
she,
go.
yeah,
There
no,
we
that's
go.
interesting. But it's funny that you mentioned this. We didn't get to talk about the Oscars, but we did mention it prior to on a couple weeks ago. It does
Mhm,
turn out that Wicked did
mhm.
win a couple Oscars, right?
It did, and the interesting thing is that if you had this in the pool, you weren't exactly a genius.
Right,
I
right.
wanna say it was the best costumes and best production design, and it's like, I mean, I face it, going into anyone who saw that movie thought, "Well, okay," and the envelope, please. Uh, but the interesting thing is talking with, friends out west about the notion of, oh, I thought it did so well at the box office and people so enjoyed it that kind of surprised it didn't get a nod for at least one of the female leads or the director or that sort of thing. And a friend pointed out, said, well, yeah, no. Peter Jackson didn't win the Academy Award for Lord of the Rings for the first movie. All right.
Ah,
He took it home for
okay.
the third one. All right.
Okay. Well,
So when the second one makes as much money, if not more, than the original Wicked and delivers the goods, look for them to get rewarded then.
look at you. All right. Well,
So,
they had 10 nominations this time, took away 2. So we'll see
there
if
we
they can
go.
get one of the big ones next time. So that's interesting to think of. So
Mhm,
yeah, maybe that reason to go see Jurassic World
mhm,
and get a trailer there and get your first sneak peek at it. But
mhm.
it's going to be another year of Epic Universal Podcast talking about Wicked. So just get with us, guys.
There we go. There we go.
We're
Just
contractually obligated at least at one every third episode to
there you
mention Wicked. So
there we go.
starting now.
Okay. So what else do we have on the news side of the events?
Well, Jim, I got one last thing because when I look for news, I travel to all types of regions.
Mhm,
And this time around, I went to Reddit. And it's
mhm,
not necessarily news per se, but I want your opinion on this because I didn't realize this was the case.
mhm.
It turned out there was an article on Reddit, just a person saying, hey, did you realize that Universal and DreamWorks owns the entire Rankin Bass catalog? Is that true? And
It
why aren't we using that in the holidays?
Well, okay. Now, what they're referring to is that back in July of 2012, DreamWorks Animation acquired Classic Media. And in fact, they got it for a steal. They got it for $155 million. But what's interesting about Classic Media is they are kind of a clearinghouse for the properties that Classic Media had weren't just Rankin Bass. I mean, they were things like the Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol or Casper the Friendly Ghost, the Lone Ranger, Lassie, Rocky and Bullwinkle. So they got a lot of properties, and in fact that's what's kind of interesting is you saw DreamWorks actually move on a couple of things. Remember, they made a feature length version of Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Okay. Yeah. I remember
yeah.
that.
So they have moved on some of these, but the thing is that they acquired, this is 450 titles, and then individual episodes of television shows and that sort of thing. This is 6,100 episodes. So in a weird sort of way, it's like, okay, you acquired Fort Knox of IP, and it just, don't get me wrong, you've seen DreamWorks and Universal do things like they tried to do a stage version of the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol. There's a version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that they're trying to turn into a stage show as well, or a perennial kind of like Elf the musical.
Okay.
So they have it. I mean, it's definitely something they've acquired. But the problem is a lot of this stuff is popular. I mean, Casper the Friendly Ghost, all right? Popular back in the 40s. And remember that when it's, oh my God, they own all of the Rankin Bass stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but that also means horrible holiday specials like the Leprechaun's Easter,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
things that ran once on television.
Well, what I thought was, and this is what kind of blew my mind, is I think Islands has a great holiday vibe
Mhm,
because of the Hula Day and just the Grinch aspect. But I was kind of underwhelmed a little bit when we went over there at Universal proper
mhm,
for their holiday. I mean, I know they have Earl the Squirrel, and that listen, he is worth every
mhm.
penny. But I was just like, well, if you have something like Rudolph or the Bumble or like or Heat Miser or any of those things, like you could really make a land or a show and really kind of even out, because for holiday I'm definitely going over to Hula Day. So I just
Mhm,
thought that was interesting, and maybe they have the rights, and I didn't go deep enough in there, and I did see some people saying, well, that might not be the theme park rights, they just
mhm.
have the movie rights, blah, blah, blah. But I just thought it was really interesting to know that they have this IP, which I think Rudolph has to be one of the top Christmas IPs out there.
Oh
To
yeah.
not do something with that in the theme park seems crazy to me. But
Well, but here's the irony that if you go to Orlando at the holidays, if you want to go, and in fact, I have been trying to do this for years now, and I have just not been able to time it properly because I want my photo taken with Yukon Cornelius.
right.
but he's at SeaWorld.
Oh.
They license the right to him and the
Okay.
Bumble,
All right.
and Rudolph and Clarice, but they're over at SeaWorld.
Look at
So
that. I did not venture enough in my Orlando market to know that. That makes a ton of sense. Well, that was the question I had, is if you had that IP, why the heck wouldn't you use it? Well, it turns out they probably don't. They have the...
But again, it's so interesting you bring this up because various parks get the rights to certain IPs. And in fact, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about how a Paramount-owned IP wound up in the Universal parks. You may know this gentleman, Eric. He lives in a pineapple under the sea.
Oh, I know him. Okay.
Okay, but we'll talk more about SpongeBob. But first, this.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
This episode is brought to you by Hyundai. Think you know what an electric vehicle should be? Think again. From the charge time and range in the Ioniq 5 and 6 to the 601 horsepower Ioniq 5N, Hyundai is redefining what EVs should be. Learn more about Hyundai EVs at HyundaiUSA.com. EPA estimated 303-mile driving range for 2024 Ioniq 5 SE SEL limited rear-wheel drive and 361-mile driving range for 2024 Ioniq 6 SE long-range rear-wheel drive with fully charged battery. Actual range may vary.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other topics, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
All right, and we're back. By the way, folks, if you listened to last week's show, we talked about how Eric and Lauren went to Vegas and they came home with overpriced hoodies and a head cold.
Right.
But while they were in Las Vegas, you guys experienced SpongeBob's crazy carnival ride at the Circus Circus Hotel and Casino, right?
Right. Yeah. So Circus Circus was, I was fascinated. I guess it's it's made from like the 70s and it's an old vibe, but it's on the Strip and it's kind of the first like kid friendly or family friendly one. And it seemed like a little blast from the past, but they have what they call the Adventure Dome in the very far back, which is an indoor theme park. So we literally went back there to see that. We weren't with kids, but we wanted to see what it would look like in case we ever came back and had the kids. Okay. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was a dark ride called what is it? SpongeBob's Crazy Carnival Ride sitting there. And I'm like, oh, we got to do it.
And can I ask what we thought of the ride?
I think Lauren said it was one of the best things she did during the trip, which is it's not saying that we were very adventurous for that matter, but I think we, at that point in time, we wanted a little like theme park, Disney, Universal vibe. And truthfully told, the animatronics were really nice.
They were. By the way, made by the Sally Corporation. And just so folks know, this is a relatively new Vegas attraction. In fact, it opened March of last year, 2024.
Oh, really? It's that new? I thought it was there. Well, the funny thing is there's a lot of rumors circulating that Circus Circus is going to close, right? And being sold. And I have no idea. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then people were saying, well, Disney's going to buy it because Universal. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I believe me, Circus Circus was fun and all, but I looked at it. It like Disney would not buy it. They would demolition, like it would be gone. But this was really, really cool. And it is like a Buzz Lightyear shooting ride. It's like a Minions blast. And I got my butt handed to me by Lauren, which is the first time I've ever lost one of those games. But I think it's because I was recording the entire thing with my smartphone and trying to shoot with my left hand in the other. But I enjoyed it, Jim. I enjoyed it. And I was like, SpongeBob, Dark Ride, has that ever been happening? And I thought to myself, hey, maybe this is something they would have at like Universal Kids. right?
Well, now, and it's interesting you mentioned that because yes, there is a SpongeBob area. In fact, I have to say I am so looking forward to Universal Kids because it has a Mrs. Puff driving school,
Right.
which one of my favorite episodes of the SpongeBob series. SpongeBob is trying to get his boat driving license, and poor Mrs. Puff is stressed out large scale because
I remember this one. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Eric reaches out from Las Vegas, and it's like it's always on the job, always thinking about the Epic Universal podcast, and again, he's seen SpongeBob in Universal's Studios, Florida, not an attraction, mind you, but a store, the SpongeBob Square store. Which, by the way, in addition to featuring a ton of merchandise, has a meet and greet opportunity with SpongeBob and Patrick. And if you're lucky, you're in there at the right time. You also get Squidward. But Eric flat out asked, was there a story there for the show? And what's interesting, yes, there is. But to be honest, the story actually starts before there was a SpongeBob. And by the way, the very first episode, which is entitled Help Wanted, effectively the pilot of the show, it wasn't even conceived till the summer of 97. In fact, SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg, he actually, you'll love this, Eric. He originally wanted to call the show's lead character Sponge Boy.
Okay.
And in fact, the original name of the show was going to be Sponge Boy Ahoy. And so Nickelodeon, the legal department goes out and comes back and says, all right, it's a problem. There's already a patented product out there called Sponge Boy. And evidently it was a very erasable pen. And so they said, look, you got to come up with another name. So that's how Sponge Boy became SpongeBob. Also, I got to tell you, Eric, I remember my pal Justin Jorgensen in the mid 1990s. He's working at Imagineering, and he calls one evening to kibitz about stuff that's going on at work. In fact, he was working with John Hench on the they used to joke about this is where all the people died when they were walking around Epcot, that weird the set of slabs in front of Spaceship
Oh
Earth.
yeah.
All
The
right.
millennial, yeah. The
There we go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he's calling to complain about that. But as he's chatting, he mentions that his friend Steven, they met when they were both going to school at Cal Arts. Again, feeder school for not only Walt Disney Animation Studios, but also WDI. And Justin is mentioning that his friend Steven has just sold the show to Nickelodeon. And I'm like, oh, what's it called? And he tells me, and I go, what? And it's no, one more time. It's SpongeBob what pants? And it's just like I had him repeat it. So that can't be a show. But anyway, again, it gets pitched to Nickelodeon in summer of 97. They say yes. He produces this one episode or one standalone cartoon, Help Wanted, that gets shown in April of 98. In fact, the test audience was in Austin, Texas, and they paired it with the first episode of Cat Dog. But the show itself doesn't debut on Nickelodeon until May of 99. In fact, but to make sure as many people as possible see it, they put it on right after the Kids' Choice Award, and then it debuts July 17th of the same year, 99. But now, if we're talking about Universal and Nickelodeon, they had been together for the previous 10 years. That started in 89. And this was largely because Universal's looking at doing this thing down in Florida, and their market research says, look, you're doing a movie themed theme park. People are going to want to see an actual working studio. But we can't relocate Hollywood to Florida. You got to find somebody else. And what they then decide to do is they reach out to Nickelodeon and say, hey, we see you produce a lot of stuff. How would you like to move your studio out of New York and California to Florida, or right to work state? Not only that, how would you like a custom built studio? And we'll give it to you rent free for 13 years. And now, mind you, the only two conditions that Universal lays down is like, look, if you shoot here, we are going to contractually obligate you to say the Universal Studios Florida name 1,000 times a year.
Right.
And there was some Universal employee who was like, there with a clipboard. Okay, that's 263. All right.
So that's real. That's not even, that's literal. They had to say it 1,000 times.
1,000 times a year.
Okay.
Over the course of their broadcast day. So think about it. 365 days a year. You got to have 3 mentions of Universal every day.
That's
also, you had to broadcast for free commercials for Universal Studios Florida. But Nick executives, they love this idea. So it gets announced March of 89. Ground gets broken on a 17,500 square foot facility, November of the same year, 89. And when Universal Studios Florida opens in June 7th of 1999, the first Nickelodeon show, the Super Sloppy Double Dare, is already in production on Stage 21. And by the way, they really lean into Double Dare for this Nickelodeon's identity at the park. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen the image of the slime fountain?
I have, Jim. This was my in December. Mm-hmm. I think it was one of the best things that I got to go in. I was looking, mm-hmm. I think in July, I looked through the gate, almost like Charlie from the Charlie Factory, looking in at the factory, being like, I really wish I could be in there. Mm-hmm. And in December, I got to go in because that's where the Hula Day special is. So I pulled out my phone. I took side-by-side pictures of like, hey, this is where it was. So I knew this. I'm a 90s kid. So Nickelodeon and all these shows that was my afternoons and knowing all this. So yes, I know all about this part of the park. And so I was fascinated.
I didn't you mention that it was you and Miles, or you and Hunter, who were looking for the
Miles and I, yep.
Okay, yep. You were looking for the bathrooms that mm-hmm. were in the style of Double Dare.
Right, they have the gack or the slime on the tiles. It's like one of their last remnants, yes.
Okay.
But I know all about the fountain, yes.
Okay.
Tell us all.
Well, the fountain actually debuted a couple of months after the park. They got up and running in October of 1990. And again, if you went to the park in that first decade, you had... They had a walkthrough tour where you could look down at, again, let's be honest here, mostly empty sound stages because they didn't shoot 24/7. But when they did, they would recruit people straight out of the park to sit in for tapings. And obviously guests wanted more. And so where this got interesting is Ren and Stimpy debuted on Nickelodeon in August of 1991, some 14 months after the park opened. And Ron Schneider, the gentleman who helped create the character of Dreamfinder for Disney.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
When Epcot opened in 1992, he went over to Universal and was one of their first directors of entertainment. And, he actually shared the script with me for the Ren and Stimpy stage show that he wrote. I think it was called Space Madness. And it's one of those things where it was so authentic to the Ren and Stimpy, John Crickfalusi humor that the executives at Universal were like, yeah, this is funny. We're never doing this.
Too many people eating soap. I mean, there had to be a moment in there where somebody was taking a big bite out of soap.
Yeah, that's you're not wrong. All right. So anyway, they want to do something because people are coming, Nickelodeon fans are coming to the park, and it just sort of, they don't want to look at empty sound stages. And so it's like, could there be an attraction? And well, as it turns out, right next door to the Nickelodeon studios was the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, which was an opening day attraction, combination 3D movie, motion-based simulator. And it fell out of favor as the park marched into the early 2000s. And it's just like, it's right next to Nickelodeon. Why don't we use the exact same physical setup? The 3D movie, the motion-based simulator, only now we build an attraction around animated characters that appear on Nickelodeon. So what they decided to do is they have the characters from Rugrats, which debuted on Nick August of 91. We have SpongeBob SquarePants, which again we mentioned, debuted July of 99. The Fairly Odd Parents made their Nick premiere in March of 2001. And finally, Jimmy Neutron, who first debuted in a film. Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, went out into theaters December of 2001, and then debuted as a series on Nick in July of 2002. And so the Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast attraction debuts in the park April 11, 2003. And what was interesting is Jimmy became the de facto host of the attraction because he had actually invented flying machines on his TV show. So it was like, all right, we can get a ride vehicle out of that show. I don't know, is Tommy Pickles.
Yeah. He's thought
that's not going to happen.
Right.
But the opening scene, by the way, as a 90s kid who grew up on Nickelodeon, if you can find the ride film online, you have to watch the opening scene because there's a moment where Jimmy and Carl, take off out of their hangar and then fly over, Nickelodeon Studios, and there in the street is every character that has ever appeared in a Nickelodeon show. So,
really?
Yeah, it's an eye test. I'm not going to lie to you.
Sure.
And by the way, if you struggled, with the Disney thing they did last year, Once Upon a Studio, when they cut to everybody standing outside the building, this is that same thing.
Oh, cool. I will definitely do that. I will test it out.
All right. So you first fly to the Rugrats studio, and then you fly through the Fairly Odd Parents studio, and then through a moment with Cosmo and Wanda, which actually involves Carl winding up with hair that's made entirely out of bacon. They wind up at Ooblar's home planet, and then but again, they eventually head back to Earth, and they crash land off of the shore of Florida, which coincidentally, now we know that's where Bikini Bottom is.
Well, what do you know?
Yeah. Well, anyway, after the irony is that they have this fun show that really leans into the look and the feel of all of these great Nickelodeon shows. Is just 2 years after Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast opens, the Nickelodeon Studios at Universal Studios of Florida closes for good. April 30th, 2005. They had extended the deal a couple of years past the 13 thing. But the thing is that the cable channel had built a brand new facility out in Hollywood, Nickelodeon on Sunset Boulevard. And because they wanted some bigger name stars, and again, it was the same issue. A lot of folks were like, yes, I'd love to do your show, but you shoot it in Florida. So they moved production out to Hollywood. And of course, again, the irony here is just 12 years later, Nickelodeon Sunset gets bulldozed in December of 2017, because that's what you do in Southern California. Just sort of like, wow, this is an old building. It's 12 years old. Oh, antique, gotta go. But anyway, as for the SpongeBob and Universal story, that story's just getting started, and we will share more in a moment. But first, this.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Fred Warner, linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. Abercrombie has the new suits you need, plus all the collared shirts to go with them. The Abercrombie & Fitch Collins suit is the only suit you'll ever need for any occasion. Available in slim, classic, and athletic. Pair with a collared classic. Go with a soft, easy-to-wear sweater polo or a comfortable long-sleeve shirt. With so many different fits and fabrics, you can make a look that's completely your own. Add the Abercrombie & Fitch Collins suit and new collared shirts to every occasion this season. Shop online or in store.
Business taxes. We're stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
And we're back. And okay, so again, we were just talking about Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast. That attraction, when it opens in April of 2003. And just a month or so before that, we got our very first SpongeBob attraction, Eric, a thing called SpongeBob SquarePants The Ride. It's also known as SpongeBob SquarePants 4D, and then SpongeBob SquarePants The 4D Ride. Has a lot of names. Right. But this debuted at Paramount-owned theme parks around the country because, again, Nickelodeon was owned by Paramount. And it actually debuted in May of 2003. So just 1 month after Nicktoon Blast. And it's one of those attractions where you sit in a movie theater in a moving chair. Sure. And what a surprise. It's all about Plankton is trying to steal the recipe of the Krabby Patty again. I'm not necessarily going to recommend that you go seek this out, folks, because it's very, very early uses of CG and some primitive rigs. It's kind of hard to watch. But on the other hand, SpongeBob is hitting its stride. The very first SpongeBob movie comes out in November of 2004. And what's interesting is the other series that are featured in Jimmy Neutron Nicktoon Blast, they're starting to fade in popularity, and not SpongeBob. In fact, Eric, do you ever hear about the Holiday Inn family suites that was off Disney property that got rethemed?
You mean the hotel that Lauren vows never to stay at again?
You guys actually went to the Nickelodeon hotel?
We did not. We stayed there when it was the Holiday Family Inn and themed. Oh. So like we didn't get the full experience. We got the after factor. But I was fascinated. That's the reason why I got it. I said, this is the old Nickelodeon thing. So I know enough about it.
Yeah, because back in the day, mind you, it opened as a standard Holiday Inn family suites in July of 99. And the interesting thing is, right at the edge of Disney property, wasn't doing the business that they wanted to do. So they reached out to Nick, and they rebranded as the Nickelodeon Family Suites by Holiday Inn.
Right.
That opened in March of 2005 and featured things like a character breakfast with SpongeBob, and also had its own on-property movie theater showing the SpongeBob 4D film.
Mm-hmm.
And it did so well that Disney, which at this point still had the second half of the Pop Century Hotel, the hotel that effectively they stopped in mid-construction after 9/11.
Right.
They saw how well the Nickelodeon Suites Hotel was doing. That's why instead of doing the legendary years half of Pop Century, the what is it? The from 1900 to the 1940s, right. They did Disney's Art of Animation instead, and people then got to stay, in rooms that were themed after The Little Mermaid and The Lion King and Cars and Finding Nemo, and that opened in phases between May of and September of 2012, and obviously did crazy well. And meanwhile, over at Universal, they are doubling down on SpongeBob, at least when it comes to their Florida parks. And by that, I mean Jimmy Neutron Nicktoon Blast closes August of 2011. By July of the following year, that's when we get Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem. And it's using the exact same setup for the Hanna-Barbera thing from 1990s, same screens, same motion based. Whereas SpongeBob, SpongeBob, still a big part of the park. Earlier that same year, Universal reveals that Florida is going to get a brand new parade. The Universal Superstar Parade starts May of 2012. And this parade would feature parade units themed around Despicable Me, Hop, Doro the Explorer, and Go Diego Go, but also SpongeBob. And then, in the exact same window of time, Universal Studios opens a standalone retail establishment that celebrates this exorbitant yellow and porous fry cook, the SpongeBob Square Store. And kind of interesting, opens May 28th, 2012, replaces Universal Studios Cartoon Store, which used to be filled with Woody Woodpecker merch. And as we mentioned earlier on in today's show, that not only did this have an amazing selection of SpongeBob merch, but this was also where you could go in air-conditioned splendor, mind you.
Yes.
And have a meet and greet again with walk-around versions of SpongeBob and Patrick and occasionally Squidward. And the other thing worth noting here is that Universal, in what I thought was a really unique, fun idea, the Universal Superstar Parade would typically roll through the park at park close. So it would, for example, on a night when the park would close at 7, the parade would step off at 6. But earlier in the day, if you were on Hollywood Boulevard, you'd occasionally come around and here's the SpongeBob float or here's the Dora's float parked in the middle of the street. And the idea is that it's now a place where you can get your picture taken with the characters, but with this amazing backdrop of a Bikini Bottom.
Well, that's kind of genius. You can really stack more people. That's an attraction of its own, and you bring it out when you need to. That's pretty cool.
This is true. And again, SpongeBob again, for a show that debuted back in 99, we're still in a hot streak. I mean, for example, February 2015, we were getting our second SpongeBob feature-length film released theatrically, Sponge Out of Water. And a few months after that, we get what many consider the most ambitious SpongeBob SquarePants themed attraction, which is SpongeBob's Sub-Pants Adventure. You might want to go take a look at this, Eric. It's located in Moody Gardens in Galveston, Texas. Opened in May of 2015, and it's effectively a Turtle Talk with Crush, only it's Patrick Starr.
Oh.
I want to say Bill Farkenbarger was involved in the initial version of it, so it's crazy funny. But anyway, bringing this show to a close, folks. Look, SpongeBob is very much a going concern. We now, of course, have the Patrick Starr Show, not to mention Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Underyears. In addition to the Sponge on the Run movie that came out in 2021. We had the Sandy Cheeks film, which debuted on Netflix last August, and Plankton the movie, which, by the way, debuted on that subscription streaming service this past week, March 7th.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have another SpongeBob movie coming out later this year, The Search for SpongeBob. That's coming out from Paramount Pictures December 19th, and that one's supposed to be released theatrically. And just one final note here, folks, as we close the Kid Zone at Universal Studios Florida that closed January 16th, 2023. And the attractions found in this part of the park, the Woody Woodpecker Nut House Coaster, Fievel's Playland, the DreamWorks Destination, and Curious George Goes to Town. Those all got transformed into DreamWorks themed ride shows and attractions. And in fact, I want to say Eric and his family got in there almost right as it opened in June of 2024.
Yep.
However, two things directly adjacent to DreamWorks Land, the E.T. Adventure and the SpongeBob Square Store, stayed just as they were. And this was because, well, Steven Spielberg has effectively told the folks at Universal that they cannot remove the last remaining version of the E.T. Adventure. There used to be 3 of them. There was one at Universal Hollywood that closed back in March of 2003 and was replaced by Revenge of the Mummy. And then there was the Universal Studios Japan version that closed May of 2009. And that's since been replaced by their Space Fantasy ride, which was actually used for a lot of their FanFest events at that park. And as for the SpongeBob Square store, Eric, I've been told that is staying right where it is till the crack of doom, because it makes so much damn money for the park.
I can see that. Listen, it was when we saw that,
Mhm.
we immediately went in, and believe me, we were there in July, so it was super hot and the air conditioning was amazing. And it still has props. Like, you still can go in the pineapple, lots of merch, so much merch. And then there's a side adjacent, like, where you can almost see the meet and greet that's inside.
Yep.
But like disconnected from the store. So it is really nice. And it's just curious, like, how SpongeBob, which is a Nickelodeon property, is so ingrained. And like and they're doing that whole area at Universal Kids. So he's not going away.
No. If anything, just the fact that he is such a big part of the Universal Kids project. And remember, that is potentially the first of a series of regional parks for Universal. So, that little fry cook is going places. So, and speaking of going places, folks, it is time now for Eric and I to close up shop here and get back to the other stuff we need to do, like work on some other podcasts. So, Eric, but if folks want to reach out and suggest additional topics we can talk about on the Epic Universal podcast, or share their own stories and memories of visiting the Universal parks, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can get a hold of me at Eric Hersey on pretty much all of the social channels. We're also, if you go over to Patreon, I'm often looking at suggestions over there. So that's a great way to get us topics as well. But if people want to reach out to you, Jim, how can they do that?
Let's see. You can find me on X and Instagram at Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook at Jim Hill Media News. And all right, I guess that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. So thanks again for listening, and stick around to hear what's coming up this month on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode. And if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Len Testa, or animation and movie news. Please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcasts, like The Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about our podcast and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.